YKTA provides stamped metal chassis components and body components. At the beginning of each shift is a team meeting. Team members put on proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, while team leaders discuss any pertinent issues, including the efficiencies of lines and any safety or quality concerns. The team will then stretch as a group to prevent the possibility of strain-type injuries. The production process begins with the receiving of raw materials in the form of coils and blanks, which arrive on trucks. The truck driver and the material handler will exchange the bill of lading. The team member will sign off on the bill and each will receive a copy of the documentation. The material handler will then scan each pallet of raw materials into the tracking system using a Plex scanner. After scanning all of the materials, the handler will unload the trailer and place the material in a staging area, where it will eventually be taken to a raw materials storage area. Prior to moving stored materials into production, a coil setter will scan the material tag and measure the width of the materials to verify the correct materials are being used. Chains are placed through the coil and an overhead crane is used to transport the coil to the cart of the stamping press. The coil setter will then document which coil has been set and the dimensions of the material used and clip the material tag to the documentation. The coiled material runs through a transfer press where it is moved from one station to the next by using die fingers attached to the three-dimensional transfer bars. The material is bent, formed, and trimmed. Any needed holes will also be punched. The material enters flat and leaves a finished, stamped part. Any scrap is discharged into a scrap conveyor system underneath the press and recycled. Finished stamped parts are dropped onto the conveyor and taken to an operator at the end of the press. An operator will then inspect the parts, stack them, and place them in a container. A Plex label is printed and applied to a finished container of parts. In another area, a forklift operator unpacks the stacks of blanks in order to prepare the material to enter the press. The blank's width, length, and thickness is measured to confirm the correct material is being used. The material measurements are then recorded on the material's check log. To track material flow, the Plex scanner is used to scan a label on the press. Then the material tag is scanned to show that the corresponding material will be used on that particular machine. The raw material is then loaded into the press. In another area, an operator loads necessary components into jigs. Robots weld the components together and then transfer the parts to different stations where further welding takes place. The completed parts are placed on a conveyor where the part is transported back to an operator. Completed parts are then removed. They then go through a quality inspection where the part is checked using specific quality standards for that part before being loaded into a finished container. When finished containers are full, the team member will add a label from the Plex system. Then the parts are transported to a staging rack where the finished container is offloaded and stored. Empty containers are then added to the cart for the return to the line for more parts to be produced. When the line needs more supply parts, a team member will take an empty cart to a supply area where they will use the Plex scanner to scan the barcode of the supplies needed for the parts being produced. The component parts are then placed on the cart. The team member will then reference the Plex scanner to find out if any additional components are needed. Additional parts will be scanned and placed on the cart. Any large components are rolled into the cart. When all parts are loaded, the team member will scan the label on the cart, verifying all of the necessary components have been loaded. The loaded cart is taken to what is called the ladder and staged for future use. The team member then walks to a control panel and presses the button, which lets the system know the parts are ready for the particular production line. At another production line, smaller components are loaded into a jig and welded. They are then inspected for quality, marked, and then placed in finished containers. When a container is full, a Plex label is printed and placed on the side of the container. At predetermined intervals, the tips are replaced on the welding robots. An operator will remove the tips, take the used tips back to the tip board where new tips will be picked up, and then returned to the robot to be reinstalled on the welding machines. The control panel is then reset and the robots are sent back to home position. The robots may then run through a recalibration process. The team member will then record the time of the tip change on the team member responsibility check sheet. If machine problems occur, maintenance is called to the line. Team members will describe the problem, and they will then work together to troubleshoot any issues. The maintenance team member will acquire any necessary tools and work to repair the issue. Anytime there is downtime, a red cover is placed over the finished container by a team member to prevent anything from getting into the container. If necessary, the maintenance team member can recalibrate the robots and send them back to their home starting positions and preparations to restart the manufacturing process through the use of teach pendants. Die maintenance team members provide preventative maintenance to die presses. To prepare a die to be worked on, die maintenance team members will use an overhead crane to open a die by taking the top portion off the bottom section. Crane slings are hooked onto die lugs. The team member then lifts the top portion of the die. Then one end is lifted higher than the other, allowing for the top to be flipped upside down. The two slings in the now lower portion of the die area are removed and the die is spun around. The crane slings are reattached to the die lugs and the die is flipped upside down. The top is then lowered onto teacups so it doesn't rest directly on the floor surface. Crane cables are then removed and the die is then ready to be serviced. Safety is a priority at YKTA. Team members will be required to wear personal protective equipment or PPE, including eye protection, hard hat, sleeves, hearing protection, and steel-toed shoes. Here at YKTA, we rely on 3 key values to achieve the culture we desire: harmony, co-creation, and fairness. YKTA is committed to being a good corporate citizen to enrich the communities we live, work, and play in. Thank you for your interest in YKTA.